Hi everyone, we're going to fill in the unit circles step by step. So this is going to be a step-by-step video. Our end result should look like this. So that's what we want to finally get to. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is look at our quadrantal angles. That means we're looking at 0, 90, 180, 270, and 360. And we're going to look at that. So our radius on a unit circle equals 1. So when you're looking at this length here, this length is 1. So this point right here, my x is 1, but my y is 0. So and this would be 0 degrees. Now 90 degrees, I'm up here. It's hard for me to draw up this way. Okay, so my x is 0 and my y is 1. All right, and then for 180 degrees, and I should have put degrees here, 180 degrees is right here, and that means the length is 1, but since we're on a coordinate grid, this is your y and this is your x. This is actually -1 and 0. And then for 270, this would be this part right here. So this is 270 degrees. This would be 0, -1. So that's called your quadrantal angles. Okay? Now next, we're going to look at our 30, 60, 90 ones. So this triangle here, and I already did a video on where to get these two values. But if I put this triangle right here, so this is 30 degrees right here. I put the triangle right there and bring it down. There's the triangle. This length here for my y is 1/2. For my x is square root of 3/2. So my x is square root of 3/2, and my y is 1/2. Now if I flip this triangle around and just flip it and put it right here, that means if we do go all the way around to the terminal side of this angle, we're at 150 degrees. All right, and at 150 degrees, my y is 1/2. However, my x, this length here, it's negative because we're in quadrant 2. So this is going to be, I'll just do it out here, negative square root of 3/2, 1/2. And that would go right there. And again, I can flip it to quadrant 3. So I just flip it over. Now we still have negative square root of 3/2, but when we're going down here, we're in quadrant 3, my y is negative. So we have -1/2. And then if I flip it in quadrant 4, we're right here. So we're at -1/2. But my y is positive. It's square root of 3/2, which is right here. And the degrees, you can just go by 30s here. We know this is 180 minus 30. That's 150. So this would be 210. And this is actually 0 and 360. I'll just put 360 and 0 here. If you go down, this would be 330. All right? Now the next one is the same one, but it is the triangle is just flipped around. So in this case, we're doing the 60 degrees. So if I draw a little triangle here, in this case, we have 1/2 for x, and y is square root of 3 over 2. So basically, you're just switching your x and y. So this is 1/2, and this is square root of 3 over 2. And again, we're just going to flip this triangle around and write the same number down, but my x is going to be negative. So I have negative 1/2, but my y is positive. So that is at 120 degrees. Now I flip it in quadrant 3, and I flip this whole triangle around. We're going to be right in here. Same values, but, and this is at 240 degrees. Same values, but they're both negative. Negative 1/2 and negative square root of 3 over 2. Then I flip it in quadrant 3 or 4. And my x is positive, but my y is negative. So if you notice, I used the same triangle and just flipped it and reflected it around. Use the same ordered pair, but just change the signs depending on what quadrant I'm in. So this is your x and this is your y. Okay, and we have to do the 45, 45, 90. And that one is right in the middle of these 30s and 60s. So there it is. Again, I did a video on how to get these values, but my x and y are both the same. So it's square root of 2 over 2 and square root of 2 over 2. Then we do the same thing we did for the other one. So we're going to go flip this triangle around. And this angle here would be 135 degrees. But my x is negative in quadrant 2. And my y is positive. Flip it again to this one. This angle's 225 degrees. If you go all the way around to this angle, that would be 225. But they're both negative, so negative square root of 2 over 2. Negative square root of 2 over 2. And then I flip it to quadrant 4. Reflect it. This is at 315 degrees. My x is positive, but my y is negative. All right? So that's basically everything we filled out except our radians. So our radians is a good way to do the radians is this. First do your 30-degree one. So we have 30, 60, if you're going by 30s, 90. So if you know 30 degrees, you multiply that by pi over 180, that gives you pi over 6. So for 30, it's going to be pi over 6. And if you go by 30s, then you could just write pi over 6, 2 pi over 6, 3 pi over 6, 4 pi over 6. Then you have 5 pi over 6, 7 pi over 6. I'm not going to have room. 8 pi over 6, 9 pi over 6. That just means we have 2 30s. And if you reduce that, that's pi over 3. So 2 30s. Here's 1 30. Here's the other 30. And so that's going to be pi over 3. Then go another 30. And that means 3 30s. It's like 3 times pi over 6. When you reduce that, that's just going to be pi over 2. Go another 30. You reduce that, that's going to be 2 pi over 3. Go another 30, that's going to be 5 pi over 6. All right, we forgot 6 pi over 6. Go another 30, 6 pi over 6, which is just pi. Then we're going to have 7 pi over 6. This one, if you reduce, is 4 pi over 3. So go another 30. That's going to be 4 pi over 3. Whoops. Should go there. Go another 30. And you have this one. That's going to be 2 pi over 3. No, 3 pi over 2, sorry. All right, and then we have to erase some of this. So now we need the last ones. So we stopped with 9. And you're going to go 10 pi over 6, 11 pi over 6, and 12 pi over 6. So 10 pi over 6 reduces to 5 pi over 3. And this one right here reduces to 2 pi. This one doesn't reduce. So go another 30. That's going to be 5 pi over 3. Go another 30. That's going to be 11 pi over 6. And another 30. That's going to be 2 pi. So basically, your degrees here, you start at 0, and you go back around, you're at 360. All right? And then everything else should be filled out, and you should have your final unit circle filled in. And I don't think we need to fill anything else in more. And this would be it. And this matches your, if we look at this, all your 30-degree ones, and they don't put the triangles, but I'm just going to color code this a little bit. So if this is my 30s, you can make a bow tie if you want. These all have 6 in the radians for the denominator. All right, your 60s, I'll do those in purple. The ones we did earlier. And you can draw, like I said, you can draw the bow tie if you want. They all have 3 in the radians for the denominator. Your 45s, which is the one we didn't do, that's why I had that. So the 45s all have 4 in the denominator. And the 4s are kind of easy to remember because it's just pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 5 pi over 4, and 7 pi over 4. And all you have to remember on that, and that's the part I skipped on the other, is pi over 4 equals 45 degrees. So here we go. If we go up to pi over 4, that's 45 degrees. If you go another pi over 4, that's 2 pi's over 4s. That gives you pi over what? 2. Then go 3 pi's over 4, and you just write it down. 4 pi's over 4 would be pi. Then you do another 45. That's 5 pi's over 4. Go another 45. That's going to be 6 pi's over 4, which is actually reduced to 3 pi over 2. Go another pi over 4, and that will give you your 7 pi over 4. And if you go another pi over 4, 45, that's going to be 8 pi over 4, which equals 2 pi. So you could write 2 pi here and 360 degrees. because that's kind of left out on this. And that's it. Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.